Good evening and welcome to NTD UK News. I'm Stuart Leese and here are today's top stories. MPs are urging Downing Street to fix the date when overseas holidays are allowed to begin. Gusty winds and heavy showers batter England and Wales, and the cost of repairing Big Ben is soaring to £80 million, more than twice the original plan. The police have made a tragic discovery in their search for clues to the disappearance of 33-year-old Sarah Everard. She went missing a week ago from Clapham, South London. NTD's Neil Woodrow has the story.
Suspected human remains have been found by police in Kent searching for missing Sarah Everard. She was last seen via a doorbell camera here in Pointers Road, South London on the evening of March the 3rd. A police officer in his 40s, part of the Met's Parliamentary and Diplomatic Protection Command, was arrested on Tuesday evening on suspicion of kidnapping and later murder. He was said to be off duty on the night of the disappearance. Met Chief Commissioner Cressida Dick gave a briefing on Wednesday evening.
I want to start by saying that my thoughts and prayers are with Sarah Everard's family and her friends at this incredibly difficult and painful time.
Dick said the remains were discovered in an area of woodland in Ashford, Kent.
As you can imagine, at this early stage we are not able to confirm any identity, and indeed that may take us some considerable time.
She said the news of the police officer's arrest has sent shockwaves and anger through the public and through the Met.
I speak on behalf of all my colleagues when I say that we are utterly appalled at this dreadful, dreadful news.
A woman in her 30s was also arrested at the same location on suspicion of assisting an offender. Prime Minister Boris Johnson, in a statement on Thursday, said, "We must work fast to find all the answers to this horrifying crime." Home Secretary Priti Patel wrote, "Every woman should feel safe to walk on our streets without fear of harassment or violence." Women have flooded social media with posts about steps they take when out alone at night to keep safe. These include clutching keys to use as a weapon and wearing trainers to help them run. Others detailed a catalogue of incidents of harassment by men in public over the decades since they were schoolgirls. This tragic episode has spurred a vigil to be arranged this Saturday in Clapham under the headline "Reclaim These Streets." Neil Woodrow, NTD News.
The Transport Committee says consumers and businesses need certainty about when foreign travel can resume. It's urging Downing Street to stick to the 17th of May.
MPs are asking the government to confirm the 17th of May as a start date for non-essential international travel. The Transport Committee says consumers, employees and businesses need to know for sure, and it's particularly concerned about the aviation industry. In a new report, MPs wrote, "If the 17th of May restart is delayed, airlines and airports will experience an extended period when people are not travelling, which will exacerbate the financial challenges that those businesses have faced over the past year, perhaps to critical levels." The MPs are also urging the government to clearly define the standards a safe destination country would have to meet. Downing Street is under extra pressure after several European countries said they are allowing vaccinated tourists from the UK back in. Cyprus is the first country to open its borders, starting on the 1st of May. A task force under the Transport Minister is expected to give a report on international travel to the Prime Minister on April the 12th.
Heavy wind and rain batters England and Wales, causing travel disruption and power cuts.
March comes in like a lion. Strong winds and heavy showers continue to lash England and Wales this morning. The Met Office yesterday warned of 50 to 55 miles per hour winds inland. Over the hills and on some exposed coastlines in the south and west, gusts could be 60 to 70 miles per hour. Overnight, one coastal area in Wales experienced 86 mile per hour winds. 69 per hour winds, the strongest in England, swept Shivana on the north coast of Devon. Strong winds caused power cuts in some areas in South and West Wales. 3,000 homes lost power, but many were restored later. The Severn Bridge was closed in both directions. Train services in some areas were suspended due to fallen trees. Highways England alerts showed strong winds or overturned HGVs, also closed roads and bridges. The Met Office, in a new yellow weather warning, says some northern regions in Scotland may have snow and ice overnight, causing travel disruption.
Metropolitan Police discovered an illegal rave in West London's Southall. They say they are trying to trace the event's organisers. Officers patrolling Hortus Road around 9 a.m. on Sunday heard loud music coming from a disused bank. Inside they found DJ sound equipment and 44 revellers.
How many people? Oh, everyone's detained, all right? You can't leave.
All 44 were reported and may face an £800 fine. The police said they will continue to shut down illegal events. And in other news, Rolls-Royce reporting a £4 billion loss for 2020 as a jet engine maker's business was shaken by the pandemic. But its CEO says the worst is over. NTD's Patrick Hayden has a look.
Rolls-Royce has reported a loss in 2020 of £4 billion. Its CEO, Warren East, says that the worst is over. But if that's not the case, then the company is still well placed to handle more turmoil. Rolls' model of charging airlines for the number of hours its engines fly meant much of its income dried up last year when travel stopped. That forced it to ask shareholders for cash and take on £5.3 billion of new debt. Its civil aerospace arm, whose engines power Airbus A350 and Boeing 787 jets, accounts for just over half of group revenue in a normal year. Last year's cash burn of £4.2 billion was in line with analysts' expectations. Rolls-Royce said it will reduce it to £2 billion this year. During 2020, the company axed 7,000 jobs, which is 15% of its staff. It also earmarked £2 billion of assets for sale to repair its balance sheet. Analysts predicted a loss of £3.1 billion. The company expects the rollout of vaccines worldwide will help bring back travel and the industry back to profit. Patrick Hayden, NTD News.
The cost of refurbishing the iconic clock tower Big Ben keeps on rising. It's now at £80 million and the completion date will be later than planned, expected to be in 2022.
On Monday, Finance Committee Chair Lord Vaux of Harrowden said the original cost of the Houses of Parliament clock tower refurbishment was estimated at just under £30 million. In 2017, the case was approved at just over £60 million. Since then, it's been revised to around £80 million as of in February 2020. He said the additional costs were due to the impact of the pandemic. The refurbishment of the Westminster landmark is just part of the planned works to renew the parliamentary estate. The initial estimates for the entire project come in as high as £6 billion. Work on the UNESCO World Heritage Site is expected to finish in the 2030s.
A new study suggests over half of UK health and social care workers are experiencing mental health disorders.
The study, carried out last year by researchers at University College London, found that 47% suffered from depression, 47% from anxiety, and 22% had post-traumatic stress disorder. It also found that all frontline staff were affected, not just doctors and nurses. The researchers said among the main risk factors were concern about infecting others with COVID-19, feeling stigmatized about their role, and not having had reliable access to personal protective equipment. The authors are warning of a mental health crisis across the health and social care sector, and they are calling for immediate additional mental health support.
Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab defends the government's actions over Northern Ireland trade issues as lawful and focused.
It's targeted, it's just to make sure that the commitments to preserve the integrity of trade in the internal market is properly respected.
He added that Britain is committed to pragmatically resolving the issues with the European Union in their joint committee. The EU promised legal action last week after the British government unilaterally extended a grace period on food import checks into Northern Ireland. a move Brussels says violates the terms of Britain's exit from the EU deal. Meanwhile, the UK government's Northern Ireland office will send a senior official to the US to try to build relations with the Biden administration. It follows a visit by the EU Commission Vice President and the Irish Foreign Minister who briefed a US Congress group on the trade issues on Wednesday. And in other news, a new report cautions against police officers taking the knee at demonstrations. The report, ordered by the Home Secretary, looks into the conduct of police officers during protests. Here's NTD's Jane Well with the details.
Police should think very carefully before taking the knee. That's one conclusion from a wider report about how police manage protests. The Independent Police Inspectorate recommends police to look at the impact of certain disruptive protests. The review was ordered by Home Secretary Priti Patel last September. It followed large-scale protests last year. Thousands of activists took part in Black Lives Matter demonstrations across the UK, partly sparked by the death of George Floyd, a black man who died in police custody in the US. The Inspectorate said some officers felt pressured to take the knee. It concludes with saying police officers taking the knee will rarely be appropriate. It found forces took different stances. One officer faced sustained abuse by activists until he took the knee. National guidance says police should make the decision based on the circumstance and potential security issues. While the majority of protests were peaceful, a small portion of activists were violent or caused disruption. The report finds police often don't find the balance between protecting the rights of protesters and preventing excessive disruption to residents and businesses. In response to the report, Alana Byrne from climate change protest group Extinction Rebellion said, "We don't plan on stopping any time soon. They can try to make it a crime to care, but they will not stop people from caring." The Inspectorate backs the use of live facial recognition to identify certain protesters not following the law. The 157-page report says that while police are usually good at managing protests, a modest reset is needed. It recommends small changes in the law as long as those changes are in line with human rights laws. Jane Worrell, NTD News, London.
Coming up, Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab condemns China over its latest move to change Hong Kong's electoral system. That and more when we return. Hong Kong moves a step further from autonomy and a step more firmly into the grip of the Chinese state. Beijing votes to change the region's electoral system and ensure politicians' loyalty to the Communist Party.
China's parliament approved on Thursday a draft decision to change Hong Kong's electoral system. This will introduce a vetting system to screen politicians for their loyalty to Beijing, and is another effort to tighten the screws and consolidate its grip over the global financial hub. China's legislators gathered in the Great Hall of the People and burst into applause when the vote came in 2,895 to 0, with one abstention. In a separate statement, Hong Kong leader Carrie Lam pledged her staunch support and expressed sincere gratitude. The new changes virtually eliminate any possibility of the opposition affecting the outcome of Hong Kong's elections. Analysts say that the blanket requirement for patriotism raises the risk that politicians will compete over who is the most loyal to Beijing, rather than on the best ideas for governing the city. The new measures follow last year's sweeping national security law imposed by Beijing that has seen democratic politicians and activists sent to jail or pushed into self-exile.
Meanwhile, British politicians and human rights activists have condemned Beijing's latest action in Hong Kong.
I think the actions,
Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab said in a statement, "This is the latest step by Beijing to hollow out the space for democratic debate in Hong Kong, contrary to the promises made by China itself. This can only further undermine confidence and trust in China living up to its international responsibilities and legal obligations." Lord Patten, the last governor of Hong Kong, called Beijing's move the biggest step so far to obliterate Hong Kong's freedoms. Benedict Rogers, chief executive of Hong Kong Watch, asked what action the UK government is planning to take. He said targeted sanctions on Chinese officials are long overdue. Layla Moran, the Foreign Affairs spokesperson for the Liberal Democrats, also called for immediate action to protect Hong Kong, its democracy and human rights.
And in the US, the Biden administration announced it will have the first top-level in-person meeting with China next week. Secretary of State Antony Blinken says he plans to speak to Beijing in frank terms over its action and behavior. NTD's Lin Lin brings us more.
Secretary of State Antony Blinken will meet Chinese officials next Thursday in Alaska. This is the first high-level in-person meeting between the U.S. and China under the Biden administration. Blinken intends to raise issues of concern to the U.S., and he claims this is not a strategic dialogue.
This is an important opportunity for us to lay out in very frank terms the many concerns that we have with Beijing's actions and behavior that are challenging the security, the prosperity, and the values of the United States and our partners and allies.
Besides concerns that the U.S. has with China, Blinken said they will also talk about competition to make sure U.S. companies and workers benefit from a level playing field. He will also explore whether there are avenues for cooperation. Blinken has said that he stands by the Trump administration's description of China, that they do indeed commit genocide. On Wednesday's congressional hearing, he named a number of steps to combat this.
Going forward, to include for those directly responsible for acts of genocide, gross human rights violations, sanctions, visa restrictions, etc.
In last week's speech, Blinken described China as the only country with the power to seriously challenge the stable and open international system. House Foreign Affairs Committee Republican leader Michael McCaul re-emphasized this view. He said the Chinese Communist Party can't be treated as a normal adversary.
We also know the CCP wants to re-engineer the world. Xi promotes his Marxist ideology as a better way than democracy.
White House National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan will join Blinken's meeting with China's top diplomat Yang Jiechi and State Councilor Wang Yi. The meeting will follow Blinken's first overseas trip to Japan and South Korea. Reporting by Lin Lin, NTD News.
The Chinese regime is actively testing its own digital currency. It wants to compete with the world's most popular digital currency, Bitcoin. But can it prevail in the battle? NTD's Becky Zhou has the latest.
Chinese authorities are testing digital yuan in multiple cities such as Shanghai and Beijing. They call it e-yuan and claim it will simplify payment transactions. Both e-yuan and Bitcoin are digital currencies, but they're different.
Bitcoin was not issued by any government entities. It was issued by a group that we don't even know who they are. That's the true encrypted digital currency.
e-yuan is similar to Apple Pay in the sense that users place their phones next to a device to complete each payment. But it's also unique. Users can withdraw e-yuan via ATM machines onto their phones to make purchases. According to Chinese state-run media, users can still transfer money without internet connection.
How is the Chinese system connected with U.S. system? That's a problem that U.S. companies may face, like importers, exporters.
For those American companies that do business with China, they have to figure out a way to deal with e-yuan. But the implications of e-yuan go beyond trade. The CCP could use its digital currency to evade U.S. sanctions and support other internationally sanctioned regimes. The Washington Post says the CCP used Chinese yuan to buy Venezuela's digital currency, Petro, when Petro was created against U.S. sanctions in 2018. And Beijing could also suspend the digital wallets of human rights activists with no difficulties.
For people like the dissidents, people that the Chinese government doesn't like, underground Christians, Falun Gong practitioners, Tibetan monks, Uyghurs, if they want to punish them, they can close their account.
The Chinese regime is reportedly also trying to expand e-yuan to Hong Kong and use it at the Winter Olympic Games in Beijing next year. Reporting by Becky Zhou, NTD News.
Apple is setting up a new chip design center in Munich, Germany. It says it'll be Europe's largest R&D site for mobile wireless chips and software. NTD's Patrick Hayden reports.
Apple's building a major new chip lab in Munich, Germany. It's part of a $1.2 billion investment in the country over the next 3 years. The new facility will be home to Apple's growing cellular unit. The company says it will be Europe's largest research and development site for mobile wireless chips and software. Munich is already Apple's largest engineering hub in Europe with 1,500 engineers. They helped design the first chip specifically for Mac, the M1. It improved performance and efficiency across Apple products. Currently, there's a worldwide shortage of chips, which has affected the automobile industry, among others. The German government has recently been pushing other countries to provide it with more chips for its car industry. But Apple says the new lab will focus on 5G and future wireless technology. It's set to open later next year. Patrick Hayden, NTD News.
A Boston-based aerospace company is aiming to produce the next generation supersonic jet. There hasn't been a supersonic jet since 2003 when the Concorde was officially retired. NTD's Steve Lance has more on this story from LaGuardia Airport.
Boston-based Spike Aerospace has a plan to roll out a supersonic aircraft by year 2022. The civilian jetliner boasts that it will have passengers from New York to London in just over 3 hours. Spike CEO Vic Kachoria says the development process is moving right along.
We're just starting our next phase of development, which is to build a manned demonstrator. We'll have first flight of a test aircraft in 2022.
According to Kachoria, their proprietary quiet supersonic flight technology could significantly reduce flight times.
So the Spike SV-12 will reduce flight times by at least 40%, depending on how you're using it, 40 to 50%.
This isn't the first time similar technology has been used in civilian aircraft. We asked folks how they would feel about taking an early ride on one of these groundbreaking airplanes.
So yeah, it's definitely maybe breaking the sound barrier, but otherwise I think I'd be comfortable as long as, all due diligence is done.
If I have to travel and go to someplace, yeah, I'll take a shot at it. Yeah, sure.
But not everyone we spoke with was excited to take the voyage right away.
Like anything else, I think that I'd like to see them work the bugs out of it first. I'm never the first consumer, whether it's a camera or a phone. I'd like to see them get it right first.
Experts in the aerospace industry say this technology has been around for a long time and is ready for real-world application.
The systems are well understood in supersonic flight. We had a long track record with Concorde, so there's a lot of data there.
Spike is also focused on a state-of-the-art in-cabin experience.
So the viewer, the passengers can flick with their smartphone to whatever channel they want to look at. They want to see the left side or the right side, they can flip to that view, or they can turn on a movie.
Spike says that test flights will begin in 2022 and that regular passengers will begin flying in 2028. Steve Lance, NTD News, New York.
The weather is improving and spring is finally here. Over in New York, people are welcoming the early spring weather and locals are heading outside. NTD's Arian Pasta has a story from Central Park.
It's the first week of warmer weather here in New York City this year. And where do many New Yorkers like to go when the sun is out? You already know, Central Park. So we asked the people here how they feel about this beautiful day.
I mean, it's everything, like just sitting in the sun with my best friend.
That's just like New York City tradition. As soon as it gets warm, everyone just floods the park, so.
It's just the best place to get the most sun in the city, and it just feels good.
Yeah, just get out as much as you can and take advantage of the sun.
Well, anything else you would like to add about the nice weather in the city, about the summer?
Summer can come fast enough, and we hope that things will open up more. We hope that there's gonna be like nice little festivals.
Yeah, just I guess getting outside more instead of being cooped up inside, and hopefully traveling a little bit.
I mean, just being outside again. I've been at home almost every day, so just being outside more, it's going to be great, yeah.
Really looking forward to the warm weather. It's been a tough winter, and that's really it, just excited to get out.
So as I just learned, on the first warm day of the year, New Yorkers like to go to Central Park. But I'm sure it's not the last Central Park day of the year. Arian Pastar, NTD News, New York.
And pandemic restrictions are a headache for opera performances, especially social distancing rules. But an English opera house has found a special way to manage it.
Glyndebourne is an opera house in the idyllic Sussex countryside in southern England. Its managers are planning the 2021 Summer Festival, hoping to stage Wagner's La Traviata. To follow social distancing rules, they decided to move the orchestra to the rear half of the stage and let the cast use the front half with the chorus off stage.
And I think that will actually give the audience a different and actually a fantastic experience. So we're actually quite excited about that.
The annual Glyndebourne Festival was founded in 1934. It's now a world-class music event and a quintessentially English experience. During 90-minute intervals, the audience fan out into the grounds to picnic on the grass and enjoy the views. Last year the festival was cancelled. Hopwood expects this year they might lose £11 million.
It is about people, it's about keeping our staff employed, it's about providing work for freelancers, and it's about engaging with our audiences, continuing to engage with them.
The Opera House has 1,200 seats. The festival is always sold out, but for now only 600 seats per performance, or 50% capacity, will go on sale to allow for social distancing.
That people are booking tickets now because they're desperate to be here, and they're saying to us, we recognise we might not be able to come, but we have to hope and have optimism and have something to look forward to.
The Opera House had to draw on its reserves. She says one of the positive things is that they didn't have to make a single member of staff redundant.
That's the news for today. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Stuart Lees.